On October 20th, 2011, shaky cell phone footage flooded the global internet. The video showed a disoriented, bleeding old man covered in dust, being physically dragged and repeatedly hit by a chaotic crowd of armed fighters. This terrified prisoner was Muammar Gaddafi. For 42 years, he had maintained absolute rule over Libya, hoarding immense oil wealth and demanding his people revere him as a visionary, untouchable leader, the self-appointed King of Kings. His collapse was part of the 2011 Arab Spring. As massive popular protests rapidly dismantled entrenched governments in neighboring Tunisia and Egypt, Libya's own civilian uprising had quickly morphed into a brutal, nationwide civil war. The raw footage captured on those cell phones recorded a frantic execution. By killing their dictator on a dusty roadside, his captors erased the possibility of a legal trial, ensuring the country would inherit lawlessness instead of closure. To understand how he ended up in the dirt, we have to rewind 24 hours. By October 19th, Gaddafi's grip on an entire nation had collapsed down to a few residential blocks in District 2 of Sirte, the coastal city where he was born. Even as artillery gutted the surrounding neighborhoods, he remained detached from the reality of his situation. He spent his final hours recording defiant audio messages, insisting that the Libyan people still loved him and would rise up to protect him. Outside the walls of his compound, the remaining members of his inner circle recognized the truth. They were completely surrounded by heavily armed rebel forces and watched from above by international military aircraft. He was trapped by his own design. To prevent domestic coups during his decades in power, Gaddafi had deliberately kept his formal military fractured and weak. Now, facing an actual ground invasion, he had no unified army to defend him, only a shrinking, exhausted security detail. With the compound no longer safe and the enemy preparing a final push, his security chief planned a highly risky gamble. They would load into a convoy of civilian cars and make a desperate run for the open desert. At 8 a.m. on October 20th, the loyalists prepared to break out of the city. A massive column of roughly 50 vehicles lined up to navigate the ruined streets. The convoy was an erratic mix. Fighters packed into civilian SUVs and pickup trucks mounted with heavy machine guns, driving alongside the few remaining luxury cars carrying Gaddafi and his closest associates. They tried to spread out along the road, hoping to blend in with civilian traffic. This map of Sirte shows the exact geographic risk they took. To gain enough speed to escape the city limits, the drivers turned onto Highway 1, heading directly south. This wide road offered a direct escape route, but left the column entirely exposed to the sky. This barrage highlighted how the international intervention had escalated. A United Nations mandate originally authorized strictly to enforce a no-fly zone and protect civilians had become an active military campaign, systematically cornering a head of state. Gaddafi survived the initial airstrikes. Stunned by the blasts, he abandoned his damaged SUV, scrambled toward a 1.5-meter concrete drainage pipe running beneath the highway, and crawled into the darkness to hide. It was a profound physical collapse. A man who had hosted world leaders in opulent tents was now pressed against the cold concrete of a storm drain, gripping a golden pistol he could not use against the aircraft circling above. 4 hours later, rebel units stationed in Sirte tracked the thick black smoke rising from the highway. They arrived at the wreckage and began a systematic, hour-long sweep through the debris and the surrounding buildings. The men approaching the pipe belonged to a specific militia. They were fighters from Misrata, a neighboring city that Gaddafi's forces had brutally besieged and starved during the early months of the conflict. Because Gaddafi had eradicated all formal political opposition, he wasn't captured by a trained national army. He was cornered by a heavily armed coalition of traumatized citizens who had personal reasons to hate him. When fighters rolled a grenade into the pipe, Gaddafi surrendered. As he stepped into the sunlight, discipline evaporated. Militiamen pulled him by his hair, beat him, and pinned him to the hood of a truck while dozens of phones recorded his confusion. The rebel leadership in Tripoli had publicly committed to international law. They promised the world they would capture the dictator alive, secure him in a facility, and put him on trial for human rights abuses. But the mob on the highway operated without a command structure. Before the convoy of captors could even transport him to a secure location, gunfire erupted. Gaddafi was shot in the head at close range. That single bullet prevented a public trial. By executing him in the street, the fighters threw away the chance to thoroughly document his regime's crimes in a court of law, denying the new government a critical foundation of justice. The immediate aftermath was grim. His body was driven to Misrata and placed inside a commercial meat freezer at a shopping center. For several days, Libyans lined up to view the corpse, demanding visual proof that the dictator was actually dead. His death exposed a massive societal void. For decades, he had governed the country entirely through the rambling theories in his self-published Green Book. By design, he ensured no independent civil service, functional parliament, or alternative leadership ever developed. With the central authority entirely removed and no functional government structures ready to replace it, the victorious rebel coalition immediately splintered. Heavily armed militias refused to surrender their weapons, turning on each other and dragging the country into a second, protracted civil war. The 2011 uprising succeeded in physically tearing down a tyrant, yet the violent, extrajudicial nature of his final 24 hours perfectly mirrored the brutal way he had governed. He left his nation with no strong institutions, leaving the Libyan people to navigate the chaotic ruins of his legacy.